Alright, we're just going to do a quick little video here on how to properly maintain a spinning reel. This is a front drag style spinning reel. This happens to be a Quantum size 40 Smoke, an older Smoke, the Speeds Freak model. Doesn't really matter, they're all built pretty similarly if they have a front drag system. So just a few key things you want to do and a few key things you don't want to do. I'm going to keep this real simple. This is stuff that I do once a year annually. I even keep the supplies in the boat to do it on the boat when needed. It's real simple, real quick. So here we go. The first step with any reel is you want to keep it clean. I've got Q-tips and just regular rubbing alcohol and an old toothbrush here. I've already done that. I've cleaned this reel up. The most important thing to a reel performing properly is to keep dirt and grime out of the bearings and the gears and any of the other moving parts. So I've gone ahead and cleaned that up. So step number one is just to keep it clean and get it clean like I've got it here. So the next two things you want to do are you're going to want to oil bearing. You want to grease the gears. You do not want grease on your bearings. That'll kill your bearings. So you want to keep the grease away from the bearings and strictly to your gears. So oil the bearings and grease the gears. This one, I don't have to grease it all too often if I don't have issues, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm just going to show you I regularly oil these, so I'm going to go through that process here. And this is just some simple spinning reel maintenance if you have any issues or just annually. So here I'm going to take the handle off here. These handles on this model just are threaded, so you just take them off. Sometimes they'll have a nut on the opposite side. This one just has a cap on the opposite side. The cap's stuck on there pretty good. There it goes. It's just a simple cap. There's nothing connecting these. If you can see on both sides, there is a bearing. You know, on the inside there is a bearing on both sides, so we're going to want to oil that. But first I'm going to take the spool off, loosening the drag tension nut all the way to remove the spool on this model. This is a front drag system. What a front drag means is that the drag washers are housed inside the spool here on a spinning reel. Some older spinning reels and cheaper spinning reels have them in the rear of the reel. But as you can see there, we've got that spool off. There's a couple more bearings for you. So what we're going to do here is, this happens to be Boca Bearing Lightning Lube high-speed oil. Doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's the real oil, but I do like this applicator's needle style. It makes it really easy to get to those bearings. So I'm going to simply just put a couple of drops on those bearings. Just a little bit, not too much. You don't want it going anywhere but in those bearings. And the idea is, if you keep oil in there, any moisture or anything else that would build up in there can't get in there, and it keeps it nice and lubed up. So I'm putting that spool back on. That was simple and quick. Then the next bearing, this one's not necessary, but there is a bearing here where your line meets the bail. I'm not even going to fully disassemble it. I'm just going to get a little crack in there between these washers. I can see the bearing. Just drop a drop of oil in there. Simple enough. You don't have to do that one. That part really doesn't move that much. It's cinched down pretty good. Now here's the important part. These bearings here, these can give you issues because they're exposed. You know, they're right near the edge, so they can gather dirt and debris. So you keep these clean and keep them oiled. I'm just going to put a little coating of oil on there around the outside of that bearing with that applicator on that needle point. Put it on there. I'm going to reinstall the handle. Be careful not to cross thread. It'll go when it wants to go. Cinch it down, there you go. And I'm going to spin it around before I flip it to get that oil worked in there. Then I'll flip it over the other side. Apply some oil to this bearing. And I wouldn't advise tearing these spinning reels down too far unless you're really, this is just basic stuff. But if you don't know what you're doing, spinning reels tend to be a little complicated based on model. So you don't want to go far beyond that. So, unless you know what you're doing. So I've lubricated both of the bearings. So running nice and smooth. One last thing I'll do that some reels have bearings here in the shaft and some don't. You can take the whole assembly apart and get to the bearing. It's not always the easiest. I'll just put a drop here on the shaft of this knob just because, really, get that thing spinning nice. You can get in there, but it's a little bit of a job. But this is just the basic stuff I do. I keep the oil on the boat, so if I do have an issue with a particular reel, I get it nice and clean. But that's some very simple maintenance that you can do, is just keep it clean and oil it. You don't need to be going crazy with the oil, putting it all over the reel. Number one, you keep it clean, and number two, you just oil those bearings and it should be good to go. So that's it from here. It's running smooth, so see you on the water. Thanks.